Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Shak's Bass Podcast. Today I'm joined by the fabulous Iván Carranza to talk all about bass. How are you doing today, Ivan?
Oh, doing great. Thank you for having me here.
I'm really grateful for you to come on to the podcast. I've been following your bass podcast in the past and your YouTube channel for some time, and I think it's a really great online resource, especially for bass players who are like diving into the intricacies of bass tone. I like a lot of things you were doing with the Bass Tone Tuesday and that type of stuff. I've learned a lot from what you've done. So I'd like to just start by asking you to just give a bit of a brief background of how you ended up doing what you do in the bass world, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure, of course. Like I said, again, thank you for having me here. Do you want like the full-on in-depth detail of how I got like from when I was very young, or like from where I started making like content and that kind of thing?
So I understand that you're from Peru. You moved to Germany to do music, and that's how you got into playing sort of professionally and that type of thing. So maybe sort of taking it from when you first started in bands and that type of stuff in Germany to starting the YouTube channel and what prompted that decision?
Yeah, sure. So like you said, I moved from Peru, South America, to Germany in 2013 to go to music college. And of course, I didn't know anyone in Germany that played music. So the first contact that I had were, of course, my peers who were going to music college with me together. And there I started, getting in touch with the people who were in the same course as me. And from, the structure of the studies, you have to play in bands. So there were different kind of bands, combinations. So there was like a blues band, a hip hop band, more like a rock band. So, and everyone had to sort of rotate. So everyone got to play with pretty much everyone. And from there, you sort of, let's say, found your favorite players in different genres. And from there, several projects were born that then got on to playing gigs that had nothing to do with college. So, for example, top 40 gala bands. I had a reggae band that was like a 10 or 12 piece band with some of my friends from music college, and we played really a lot of shows for several years. So that was definitely my starting point. And from doing that, of course, then people, recommend you and you start getting called for things. You start, let's say, replacing or playing like sub gigs for other people. Hey, I cannot make it to this date, so do you know anyone? So I would jump in sometimes. But that was the start. And from there, when I finished my first degree, because I did a bachelor's degree first, when I finished, I did a master's degree then in another city. And there is when I started going more in depth into the content creation, because it was actually my project my main project for university, to check how can you use, and this is 2018, so different world, pre-pandemic as well. How can you use the internet and social media to grow your name, your brand, let's say, and use that also to generate extra income or generate opportunities as a freelance musician. So that was my main page. So I was my own guinea pig, so to say. So I could really test and try different things. I have actually, I think it's a 60-page essay on what I did on it. So I had to report that to school. But it's full of things like, camera angles, how many lights you use, what I noticed works best in terms of video duration, phrasing, and a lot of different things. But that got started because I just liked to have a different also creative outlet other than just making music. I mean, of course, I love playing, but it was like, I've always liked video. I always liked the things you can do with media, but let's say the main driving force, I would say, is that I should not be here today, for example, in Europe, in Germany, because I come from a third world country, And it's just the hours and hours that I've put and dedicated to the instrument that have taken me to the place where I am. And this is not coming from me, from the attitude of saying, hey, look how good I am or anything, because I think for myself, I'm a pretty average musician, but it's just my way of giving back to the community that has helped me, putting me in the place where I am today. So everything that I can do to share information that might be valuable or that has helped me, I want to share that to help other people as well.
That's great. Yeah, I love that angle. It's great to get the feedback, through comments and people who are really appreciative of, the content that you put on and the things that you do. And then they sort of in turn share what they know and their experience, and it becomes one big sort of bass community. I love that sort of angle on it. So talking about bass guitars specifically then, and this will probably take you right back to the beginning. So what was the first bass guitar that you actually bought, and do you still have it?
I actually do have it. I was 14 or 15, more or less. And I went to a tribute show of my cousin that he played in an Iron Maiden tribute band. And the band, it was a really like a dive bar. It was terrible. The venue was horrendous. And the bass player had a bass that was left outside in the sun. So the finish was completely melted down. And you would say, that's a piece of junk. It's not going to sound never going to sound good. But that night, and I had no contact with playing music other than, the recorder, because you have to learn it at school. But that night that I went to that pub, in the position where I was in that pub, the bass sounded, can I curse?
Yeah, if you want.
Okay, it sounded fucking amazing. It was like,
enlightenment.
It was like, what the fuck? It's like, I need to learn how to play that thing, And I think it was 1 or 2 weeks later that I convinced my mom to take me to a music store, and I bought a bass with my savings. And it was a Yamaha TRB 174 in sparkle red, so a PJ, which I still have. It's in my family's house in Peru. At one point I took out the frets because of Jacko. But I did that wrong because I did not file down the nut, so the action was like sky high. But I still have the bass, and it has still strings on it. Super rusty, but still alive.
Oh, great. Yeah, the great starter basses, Yamahas. I think my second bass was a Yamaha RBX 270, and that was a PJ, and it was just like for the money, they're just like pretty well put together and will last forever. I could have stayed on that bass, I could still be on it now and I wouldn't have a problem. Very well put together. So what was the most recent bass that you bought?
The most recent one is a Dingwall Super J. I got that last year, in actually around this time, early May. I think it arrived the 4th of May. It's a custom bass. I'm a Dingwall artist as well. I've been playing the basses for years. But yeah, that's my puppy. Do you want to know the specs? Or
so what type is that then? Is it the one with 3 pickups or?
Yeah, it's so for those unfamiliar with Dingwall basses, for those of you listening, they make multi-scale basses, meaning that each string has a different scale length. So they have the funky frets. So they are at an angle. They're fanned to accommodate the different scale lengths of each string, which makes the string tension more even, so the response is more even. The higher notes sound warmer, the lower notes sound snappier, like in a grand piano. Same concept, The bass strings are longer, the treble strings are shorter. And mine has 3 pickups, passive, and swamp ash body, and actually it's half and a half. It's half swamp ash body, the other half is northern ash, so it's a dual density. And I believe that's the first Super J bass that they've made with that feature. They have done that on other basses, but I think mine is the very first one. It has a roasted ash neck, so it's pretty much entirely made of ash, other than the fingerboard, which is wenge. But it's a really, really nice bass, really sounds good. I really like the neck pickup tone on it, because I'm a neck pickup tone guy myself. Of course, the jazz setting also sounds good, the other settings as well, but I really, really like how the neck pickup setting sounds like.
Is that a 4-string or 5?
Yeah, 4-string.
4, yeah, great. And in terms of sort of the best bass you've ever played, so you don't have to have bought this one, but is there a bass you've played and you kind of go, that's probably the best bass I've ever played, or is it one you own?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, I really like my basses. I have, I mean, the one that I've played the most in the recent years has been my Dingwall Super J. So it's like the one that I just described, but in a precision style. And I love that bass. It plays beautifully. But just to give you a very recent actually example. In fact, yesterday, a buddy from the Talk Bass forum, also on the Dingwall forum of that, came over just to hang. And I played his Dingwall Z3 6-string. And that's probably the best playing 6-string that I've ever played in my life. It was so comfortable that I was really, really surprised because I'm a short guy myself. You know, I'm 161. I think that's 5 feet 4 inches or something like that. I don't have huge hands, but that 6-string was super comfortable to play. Like the neck felt as it was a 5-string neck and pretty thin, not like super thin that you get wrist pain, but it just felt like I didn't have to adapt my technique or anything to be able to play it, which is mostly the case with other 6-strings that I've played. And I don't play 6-string, but that was really, really comfy.
All right. It's that got sort of multi-scale fan fret as well?
As well, yeah.
And it was even comfortable right on the low frets, sort of on the top string.
Yeah, and that was the other thing that surprised me as well, because I mean, back in the day in 2010 until 2013, 14, I had a Dingwall as well, a long scale one, so 37 inches to 34. Mm-hmm. And I did feel like, for me, like I said, some of the positions were a bit too big. And I've played them again several times, the longer scales one. I've played gigs with them as well. And it's definitely doable for me. No, there's no issues. But I always felt that it's a bit of a stretch for me in the lower position, let's say fret 1 to 4. But this one, for some reason, I think maybe it's the body shape combined with the neck carving shape. It just like melted into your hand. It was like a part of you. It was really, really comfy.
There's something to do with where the neck joint is on the where the neck joins the body. It'll push sometimes that first fret further out, and I find that if I'm having to reach quite far for that first fret, it sometimes then puts my wrist at a funny angle to be able to fret comfortably and keep that natural hand position. Yeah. So I kind of stray away from like those basses where the neck feels long. But it's interesting you say that you don't really feel that with a bass like that, which is uncommon. So it's good to know that there are sort of different designs and different ways around making it feel, because there's a lot that goes into why it feels a certain way. You can't always just judge it from looking at the spec sheet or just looking at the design. Sometimes it just feels completely different, and it's interesting that. And another question on the Dingwall sort of multi-scale fan fret thing. So how long did it take you to sort of adjust to that fan fret bass design? Because when I've just picked one up and played for like a few minutes, it's a bit confusing how you're like where you would normally go on the lower frets if you were moving down, the string, sorry, it's like in a slightly different position. Did you just get used to that quite quickly, or was that a bit of a thing at first?
I mean, let's say that for 80% of things, it was pretty natural. Especially on the models that I have, the Super P and the Super J, because those are pretty much the scale length of a normal, let's say, Fender bass. It's 34.25 on the E string to 32 on the G string, so it's medium scale. So it's actually a bit shorter than a normal bass. So it's you don't have that big of a stretch, and everything lies pretty, in the usual places. However, if you play like chords or do some soloing in the higher positions, there I do notice some things do require rethinking how you fret. Some things are easier, some things are more complicated. The only thing that I notice when playing, let's say in the money zone, like down low, is if I were to play, let's say, root, fifth, and octave on F, so fret 1, there I notice that the stretch from F to C, so the fifth, is a bit longer, and I need to accommodate that tiny bit. It's not massive, but that's the only thing that I can think of. Okay, that's, that feels different.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, that's interesting then. Yeah, because one thing that not put me off, but I think it's something I've got to consider whether I want to kind of relearn that sort of, well, I think in some ways you have to adjust to any instrument because they're all slightly different unless they are exactly the same design. And you kind of just change the way you kind of play to get the best out of that instrument, I suppose. So it's probably just that. So not to name and shame if you don't want to, but what's the worst bass you've ever played?
Worst bass. That's. I mean, I've played some really great brands that were not set up properly, that were hanging in shops, and I was like, really, that's insert brand X there.
Yeah,
but it's mostly the setup because you can make a £100 or €100 bass feel great. You change the pickups and that's it. You have a pretty workable instrument. Just to give you an example, I actually just gifted it to a friend of mine, but I had a Harley Benton €130 bass, a PJ. There's a video on it on my channel as well. And that was an amazing instrument. And it costs, less than €150. That was really, really good. So I think nowadays with the technology, and I think in general, all instruments have better or are built better than when I started playing. So I would say it's mostly about getting the setup right than, okay, brand X is terrible or this model is really bad. Just to answer your question, maybe a bit more direct, I remember it was a no-name brand on a school where I was teaching, and literally the action was easily like this high from the fretboard, and it was like impossible to fret. And I remember the school director asking me why couldn't the students learn on that bass, because I was telling her that she should buy some new basses for the school. And I was like, no, but we have this one. I was like, no.
Yeah, it's a bit challenging when the action's that high.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So what I was going to do is I'm going to move into the next section. This is 10 of my favorite things. So they don't have to be your absolute favorites because it's quite hard to just choose, but if one of your favorite things for each question. And this gives a bit more of a background, some of the things that you like that are non-bass related as well. So first one is favorite travel destination.
That I've been to or I would like to go?
Either.
I would really like to go to New Zealand. And my favorite travel destination, well, I always like to go back home to Peru because of the food. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. But I also really like Sweden, Stockholm especially.
Oh, nice. I've not been to Stockholm. I have been to, I think, Visby, which is an island, Swedish island. But yeah, sounds like a good two places to have on my list to visit. How about favorite bass strings? I'm currently using Dingwall nickel strings because it makes sense because of the brand. But other than that, I really like DR Pure Blues. They are pretty bright for not excessively bright, don't get me wrong, but they're bright for a nickel string. Mm-hmm. And they still have a lot of fundamental, good low-end content, and they're pretty flexible, which I like. Other strings that I also really like, the Daddario NYXL, pretty similar to the Pure Blues. Also the regular Daddario EXL nickels. And for flats, I really like Tomastics. How do you like the really low tension on the Tomastics for your flats?
Yeah, and also the mid-range content on them. They cut through very well without being too aggressive, but they have good mid content so that you hear what you're doing, but still they're pretty thumpy.
Yeah, they do sound great. And what about a favorite bass line?
Oh, that was also tricky. I would have to go with the one that probably got me started playing, which is Rothschild by Iron Maiden.
Oh yeah, great. Yeah, that's a good one. Quite difficult as well. It's quick, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that's a classic. Okay, what you mentioned food. So favorite food?
Ceviche. That's a typical Peruvian dish made out of fish. Essentially, you can say it's raw, but it's like cooked, let's say in quotes, by the acidity of the lemon or lime juice that you put on it. And then you have onions, you have sweet potatoes, some corn, very fresh. So you eat it on the beach. It's really, really nice.
Oh, cool. Do you make that in Germany yourself?
No, I've never made. Well, I've made it once myself. It's tricky to find the right limes and lemons that have the right acidity. But there's a really good Peruvian restaurant where I live in Hamburg that I love to go to, and it tastes really like home. To the point where the first time I went, I called my mom and I told her, "Mom, I found a place."
That's great. I've never tried it, but I'll have to get it on the list to try.
Can recommend
sounds
it.
Great. What about a favorite bass player?
It's hard to pick one. Because of Harris, I started playing bass. So Steve Harris from Iron Maiden, right? But recently I've been listening a lot of Joe Dart. So from Wolfpack. And of course, my good friend, also a huge inspiration source, my good friend Vincent Garcia. You probably know him.
Oh, yeah.
He's also like I think influencing right now a big amount of people, his whole generation with his playing, and he's a super nice guy. So definitely learning a lot from him as well right now. But from the point of view of why I'm doing what I'm doing, probably Steve Harris.
Yeah, that's a good shout. And then favorite bass effect.
I would say distortion.
Okay, yeah. I thought you were going to go compression. That's mine, but distortion's a good shout.
The thing is, distortion is also a little bit of compression. So
yeah, you get some, don't you? It's 2 in 1, I suppose. And do you have a favorite album?
That's a tricky one as well. I would say Rust in Peace by Megadeth.
Nice, yeah. Definitely listened to that a few hundred times over the years. That was so I'm an ex-drummer, and probably about 10 years ago so now, I got asked to fill in for a Megadeth tribute band.
Nice.
And I only had a few weeks to learn the set, but Holy Wars was in there, and it's quite challenging to play, but it's a classic album. Love that one.
I went to the Rust in Peace tour. I think it was the 25th anniversary tour of the album.
Oh, yeah.
And that was, I think, by far the best show I've been to. It was insane. The sound, the performance, it was amazing. It was my last year of high school, and just seeing David Ellefson playing live in front of me and playing all the bass lines, and it was like, no way. It was really, really cool.
Yeah, I'm a massive Megadeth fan, and I love that album just because there's just so much groove on it. Like there's so many parts where the riffs are just like you can properly like bang your head to it, but then all the solos, I just love Friedman's playing. Like Tornado of Souls is like my number one guitar solo. I just think it's just got everything in it, and there's just so many great moments on that album. In all the bands I've been in over the years, I've always covered like Megadeth songs, but yeah. Great, some great bass playing on there as well. Yeah, and sure. Obviously Dawn Patrol, that's a good one for people to learn on the bass.
Yeah.
What about a favourite film?
Lord of the Rings.
The trilogy, or just like...
I would say the trilogy, but of course the Return of the King is my favourite one.
Yeah, classic. Okay, I'm going to go favourite pickup configuration.
P only.
P only.
Yeah.
That's what Johnny went for as well. I thought he was going to say jazz bass, but I'm surprised you went for P only because you've got some basses with quite a few pickups on there and stuff. But
but the truth is,
it's easy to stick to.
90% of the time, I use the P pickup only. It's like the other ones are just in case I need it, but most of the time it's just neck pickup. That's it.
Yeah. No, I'll probably agree. To be fair. Okay, do you have like a favourite bass brand, or do you have like a bass brand that you're quite into? Is it maybe like Dingwall or something? Who would you say is your favourite sort of?
Yeah, I'm a Dingwall artist, so I think that says that I really like the instruments. But just to give the listeners also some more, information. For example, I also really like Lakeland basses. I played for a long time. Lakeland P bass, which was the P with a J neck, which was really, really cool. The J neck profile of those basses is super comfy. It weighed pretty much, I think it was close to 5.5 kilos, so it was sort of heavy for a 4-string bass, but it was super comfy. Also, right now, I think Spectre is doing a lot of great stuff, putting a lot of great instruments. I also have a couple of G and L basses that I really like when I need that traditional sound. I have a J, I have a P, which record really, really well. And also what I've seen a lot lately on the internet, which I hope I can get one at some point, is a mic lull and an F bass.
Yeah. They look pretty good. Quite expensive, those F basses, but the sound is quite remarkable. Some of the ones I've heard anyway. But yeah, I've got the hollow body Lakeland, the HB30, and it's kind of like it's like a Hofner, but you can actually intonate it properly because it's got a tune-o-matic bridge, so it's like perfect if you want that vintage tone. Really well made. It's the only Lakeland I've played actually, but it's really, really good bass, and that's my first experience of that company, but really, really into them. Okay, so in terms of bass signal chain and sort of pedals then, so I've asked you to send in your current pedalboard picture, so I'll share this on screen. I think you did a video recently, didn't you, talking about your tour pedalboard? And it was just to really sort of talk about, so firstly, your signal chain in terms of your pedalboard, and then probably go on to like what are you currently using for your live rig, you know, in terms of an amp and cab and that type of thing. So let's just see if we can get this up. Can you see your pedalboard there? I'll zoom in a bit. Okay, so do you want to talk us through sort of what you're currently using then? And I suppose most of it's on your quad-cortex here, but I'm a big fan of the capo, so how you use that as well.
So to let me maybe backtrack a step, I go from my bass, the passive bass, right? I have a wireless transmitter by Sennheiser. This is the Evolution Wireless Digital. Have had zero issues with it and more than 3 tours. Super reliable, 0 dropouts. Can highly recommend it. I paid for it, so no affiliation with the company. But I go from the bass, into, out of the Sennheiser into the capo. And then, no, sorry. Do I go into the capo? We're having loop. I don't remember how I had it for the tour, actually. Judging from the picture, I go into the quad-cortex, and then it gets sent. No, wait, it's in the last in the chain. Then. Okay, sorry, I have to remember how I had things going. So I go from the wireless into the quad-cortex, and there I have actually I can look at it myself here. I have my quad-cortex right next to me. Here. Okay, so I have a compressor in the beginning of the chain. Don't do it much, to be honest. It's just to tame a bit the transients, because for the band that I'm playing, we switch genres of music in between the set list and even between songs. So it goes from like punk rock to Latin dance music, and one song also reggae, some ska. So it's very varied what I need to cover. So I just put the compressor to even a little bit the signal when I attack with the right hand. I'm using the 1176 style of compressor. Then I have a transpose block, so a pitch down function, because we have a song in E flat. I could, in theory, just do it manually, so just physically transposing with my left hand, which I've done before, but there's a couple of portions in the song where I would like to have a low E flat, and I would have to either retune or have another bass. So the transpose block makes my life easier, but just I can play in A, which is the song is in A minor, so I can play in A, but still access that low E flat with that. Then I have a drive, which I kick in for some parts of the set. It's not like a full-on raging overdrive. It's just to thicken up a little bit the sound and support the guitars, and try to not cut through the mix, but to blend in better with the guitar to make it sound like the guitar is bigger. So
yeah, is that like an always on, or is that you turning on that?
I turn it on for usually the last chorus of a section or the intro of a song to really come in at the full force, and then step down the gas for the verse, for example. So I always toggle that on and off. Then I have an octaver, which I use for usually song endings or accents that need some more power. And one thing that I've been experimenting a lot lately, and I used on this tour, and I've used it maybe for the last 2 months, is I've been experimenting a lot with chorus, which was one thing that I really never used because I think it can be easily overdone to make it sound, okay, here's an 80s style chorus that's like really apparent, and I don't like that too much. But by putting a chorus and blending it in, like, between 10 to 20%, depending on what you're doing, it makes the bass sit in a mix slightly differently so that it's wider and it's not taking up much more space in a mix. So you're not making it louder to make it more present, but it covers more sonic ground, which is pretty nice. Then I have then I have an amp, which is an SVT, Ampeg SVT style. Then a cabinet, an 8x10 cabinet. Then some EQ, just to match how volumes when I turn on the distortion, because you always lose a little bit of low end. So I'm boosting a little bit at like shelving style from 100 hertz below. And when I switch to my rock scenes, I have a boost at around 2.5K to, in theory, add more treble, but not adding treble, so adding high mids. And then for one song, I have a reverb and delay. And then at the end, I have another compressor just to even out all the changes that I make while playing, so that the front of house guy or girl gets a consistent signal all the time, no matter if I'm pressing compressor or if I'm using the octave or if I'm using the chorus, so that all is nice and even and a consistent volume.
Is that like a LA2A style compressor at the end, or do you do an 1176
I'm
again?
using their an SSL style of compressor.
Okay.
So 2-to-1, fairly, normal attack and release ratios, nothing crazy, just a little bit. I mean, I'm usually aiming to reduce like 2 dB of gain reduction, not much.
Yeah.
And then that goes to the capo. And then from the capo, I take the signal towards our in-ear rack, which then splits the signal. And one end goes to front of house, the other end goes to an in-ears. And on the capo, I'm not doing anything. The EQ is flat. It's just to use the saturation circuits to add some, saturation to make the sound glue better with your instruments.
Yeah, and is that capo post everything that you're using on the quad-cortex?
Yeah, that's the last thing in the chain. So the signal goes from the quad-cortex into the capo, and then capo XLR out to the rest.
I see, yeah. And did you find that when you got the quad-cortex, you freed up a lot of pedals that you had in terms of like shrinking your board, because the stuff on there is usable rather than individual pedals?
To be honest, I was for the longest time against going digital, because I also have a Noble DI and I have some also all preamps and so on that are great. And the Noble sounds amazing. I love it. I've also taken it on tours and used it on gigs and so on. But going digital, and this applies to all the units that are used nowadays, so Helix or Fractal or whatever, it just makes your life easier in terms of consistency, that I know I'm powering it up and it's always going to be the same. There's no knobs moving. I don't have to worry about tubes breaking. I don't have to worry about, somebody on stage accidentally bumped something and it got changed because it's a preset,
Yeah, a lot of people, why they say they don't like things like the Stomp is because it's kind of like to adjust stuff on the fly. They don't have that sort of tactile ability, but I kind of see that as a positive because I like the fact that I can really dial something in and it's set it and forget it. And every time I bring it back up, I've got the on-stage EQ on my amp. I can do little bits with that. But if you got too much control, it distracts you from playing because you're thinking, oh, should I turn that down? Does I need to turn this up and whatever? So I like the fact that you set your presets, you get them dialed in, and then that's you for the gig then. And I love that. And I do think it makes it so much easier. I mean, I've sold so many pedals since I got the HX Stomp and started to dial in the presets. And talking about chorus there, I made like a similar sort of Duff McKagan style chorus effects using the HX Stomp, and I'm like, I don't need a chorus pedal anymore. There's loads of great new pedals that you can buy and boutique ones and stuff, and they probably do sound great, but for the style of chorus sound I'm likely to use, and I do a similar thing to you, I don't put my full signal through the chorus pedal. I blend in the sort of dry bass and any amp sim or whatever. I don't push everything through the pedal because I think you lose too much. But just having a bit of it, 30, 40% dialed in, just getting that perfect, you still have all that bottom end and it really brings out your sort of tone. So I've kind of gone that way myself as well. So in terms of then, what would you send this signal to then from a live point of view? What amp are you using and what cab are you using, or does it depend on the gig?
Yeah, I was going to also actually say about that because you mentioned the word also amp. We don't use amps on stage right now.
Okay.
We go
because you got your in-ears and
full in-ears, silent stage. I have an amp here at home. I have an Ideator Tonehammer 700 and also a Darkglass Microtubes 900 V2 and a Mesa Boogie Cabinet 115, which sound great. But it's just convenience that to not have to lug them around, because if I have to bring an amp, that also means getting a case for the amp, which makes the bulk even bigger and makes it, loading in more work. It's less space that we have in the car with the band. And I'm super happy with my setup at the moment. If there was the option, I would have an amp and in-ears. But right now, due to convenience and traveling reasons and logistics, it's just easier to go without it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think everything's a balancing act, and sometimes it just makes sense to do what's most convenient and have that sort of simplicity of like lugging your stuff around and being like sort of, it takes away a lot of the stress as well, less to go wrong and stuff like that. So in terms of like a signal chain for home recording then, let's say you're doing something for your YouTube videos or you're doing some home recording for like a band project or something. How does that signal chain differ to your live stuff, if it does at all?
It is different. Usually I always track a clean DI signal, which usually most of the time is just my Noble DI. So I have always that as a backup. So sometimes I would use the RNDI by Neve that I also have here to have a clean signal, depending on the type of project that it is. But the clean signal is always there. And then depending on the song, I use different things. So I might only use the DI and then reamp it with the plugins that I have, which are usually the Plugin Alliance or Universal Audio Ampeg SVT plugin, either B15 or the SVT, which I think sound really, really good. Or I would use the quad-cortex to dial in an amp sound and then have the DI and send both of them so that the producer can pick whatever he or she wants. Or I would use, for example, the capo or a Darkglass distortion if I need one, depending a lot on the project. But most of the time is the DI, and then I reamp things so that I have the flexibility to try what really works. And also, if somebody says, that sounds great, but can you maybe dial back in on the treble, let's say, so I can adjust and do it.
Yeah, and how do you usually use cab sims? Is it kind of, say if you're using the plugins, you'd kind of sort of blend one in that way, or do you use a cab sim often, or do you tend to stick with the original DI?
I mean, in the plugins, for example, let's say that Universal Audio plugin of the SVT, It has a cabinet there. You can also turn it off, so it's just the amp. But most of the time I use the capsule that is the 8x10 and an SM7B, and I think a ribbon mic. I think that sounds really, really nice. It has good mid content, enough top end. It makes the bass really present in the mix, but not makes it harsh. So it's really, I think that's my favorite one. Of course, it varies depending on what kind of style of music you would play. If I would need a more scooped sound, I would probably grab like a Beta 52 maybe to take out some mids and bring out some more sparkle. So it depends, but usually I gravitate towards that 8x10 with an SM7B.
Yeah, I see. Great. Okay, so moving on to sort of talking a bit about sort of bass playing then. If you were to play with a pick, what one do you use and why?
I've recently started using, maybe you can see this in the camera, this Dunlop .60.
Oh yeah, quite thin ones them, aren't they? Tortex.
Yeah, exactly. Before, for many, many years, I used, let me see if I find one here. Yeah, the also Dunlop 1 millimeter nylon pick, max grip, because my hands sweat a lot, so holding onto a pick sometimes is hard. So I've been using this ones as well. I've also tried, and this is what I've been gravitating towards thinner picks. So I've used 0.80 something and then 72 of these ones, the nylon ones. But for the tour, we had one song where I had to use a pick, and I used for the entire tour this 0.60 Tortex, and they've worked great. Enough attack. They are, for me at least, stiff enough that you get a good articulation and enough chime to the notes, and they don't slip too much. So I like the orange ones.
Yeah, that's good. So in terms of I know you've been touring a bit recently. What would you say is the hardest thing about being on tour for you?
Sleep.
Sleep. Or lack of sleep.
Because I'm naturally an early riser. So when I'm not going on tour, I wake up at 5 in the morning and I go to the gym. Then I'm at 6 a.m. and I can wake up without an alarm like that. And this is going since I'm not a baby. According to my mom, I will wake up super early. As soon as I see daylight or light in general, I'm awake. Mm-hmm. So balancing that, and then of course playing in the night, long hours. Usually we arrive at the hotel back after the gig at 2 a.m. and then you have to wake up. If you want to have breakfast before going to the next town, you have to wake up at 9 maybe, or 8 something to shower and then go down, eat, and then you leave, depending on how far the next city is. But then you're tired, of course, because when you're in your hotel bag at 2 a.m., you're still not, okay, I'm just going to fall asleep directly. You still have adrenaline in your body. Maybe you talk to your bandmates about, how the night went, how the show was. Maybe you need to answer some text messages or whatever, or take a shower. So you might end up going to sleep at 3:30 or more, depending. So catching up on sleep and having the energy to deliver the same performance night by night to the audience, which is paying not only with their money, but also with their time, which isn't something that they're going to get back. So making sure that the people that come to the show really get what they're paying for, and you getting the energy and concentration and focus to be able to deliver that. It's like finding all the, when you're driving or going to the next town, trying to sleep if you can, or if you need to work on something else, but trying to sleep to catch up on the hours that you've missed. That's probably the most challenging thing for me, at least.
Yeah, I understand that. I can't survive without my sleep. It's one of the things that really affects me. So in terms of say practicing the bass and one question I like to ask is, if you only had 10 minutes to practice on your bass every day, sometimes we get sort of distracted by other things that are going on. We don't have much time to play, but it's always a good habit to at least pick up your bass every day. What would you suggest someone does with those 10 minutes, or what would you do?
First, I would say the 10 minutes might seem like short time, but if you put a timer and just practice, 10 minutes actually quite a bit of practice time that you can squeeze in. And I have been several times in that position where I don't have real like a half an hour or 1 hour, 2 hours to practice. And it's like, okay, I want to at least get something in there. Because life gets in the way, you know, you need to do stuff. You need to go grocery shopping. You need to, you know, go out with your friends, go out with your girlfriend or to your parents or, you know, work, or there are a million things. But I've been doing, for example, what Yannick Wisdala suggests on his channel to do. There's some like chordal exercises like triads, combining triads like major and minor up and down the neck. What I've done with that, after you find like a shape that, you know, it's interesting to play, is to run that by the circle of fifths, so all 12 keys, to get it used to, you know, how it is to play it in all positions of the neck and in all keys. So if, you know, moving from C to F to B flat, etc., etc., etc. That way you get a workout not only of physical of your fingers but also your mind, because there are phrases that you cannot play in certain positions of the neck, so you need to adjust, you need to transpose, you need to move around. So that's mostly what I would say, you know, stick to some basics like triad chord shapes, but move them not only, or play them not only, okay, here is, you know, C major up and down in one position, but to make them go around the circle of fifths is also always a good workout.
Yeah, that's good. I like some of those exercises where you kind of, I think there's one I do where you play in triads, but you kind of do it in fourths. So it's like the circle of fifths, but backwards. Mm-hmm. But you kind of learning the fretboard at the same time, because you always have to know, you know, what note, where's that on the fretboard. So you kind of always sort of relearning that sort of muscle in terms of where the notes are. And then also you kind of getting some dexterity on the instrument as well. Yeah. And it just keeps your fingers moving and gets that muscle memory there as well, doesn't it? But because I always often find as well that, like you say, about 10 minutes not seeming that much, but you actually get quite a lot done. Sometimes, you know, you might say, I'm only going to practice for 10 minutes. But if you have got half an hour or an hour, you might find that you actually sit there for an hour. Yeah. And, you know, it's the fact that you picked it up, that 10 minutes led to much more. And if you just went, oh, I'll just do it tomorrow, you wouldn't have done any practice, but you may have got an hour or 2 hours in where you hadn't thought. So it's probably a good habit as well. Yeah, totally. I mean, sometimes it's like, and I've been in that position where I was like, oh, I don't want to practice because, you know, it's, you know, I mean, as much as fun as it is, sometimes it's like, you know, it's like, I have to practice, you know. But then if you say, like you said, if you just pick it up and do, okay, I'm going to commit to 5 minutes, and then you start getting into the hang of it and you enjoy it, it's like, then you look at the clock and it's like, oh, 2 hours, you know, where did time go? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if you had sort of one piece of advice to pass on to fellow bass players who are kind of learning, or, you know, anything about bass playing really, what would your advice be? I would say the most important one, and I wish I had started to doing that more earlier, to train your ears. So learn stuff by ear as much as you can, because that is going to take you like much further than looking at tabs and just trying to play things that other people are playing. Of course, it's important to transcribe. Don't get me wrong. But by, you know, learning to play stuff by ear, you work out all the elements that are important. You work out, of course, your hearing. So if somebody plays something, you can recognize it. If you hear a phrase, you can recognize what that is. But also by learning by ear, you've practiced figuring out things on your own. So, hey, I'm hearing this. How is this person playing it? So let me try to experiment and come up with my own fingering. That leads to you developing your own phrases and playing things in your way. And then, of course, you get better at, the more you do that, you get better at it. So you can, you know, just pick up things faster. So you have to learn a set list. You don't have to, oh, how is this phrase? I cannot pick it up to do it quicker. And it also helps with communicating with other people, because once you start learning things and then you apply the theory to it, you start realizing, okay, what I just heard has this name. So you can communicate that to other people. So, okay, this is a minor triad or a major triad or whatever. But learning to hear things is probably the most important thing, I would say. And this is something
that I wish, like I said, I started doing it much earlier, or I would be better at it, because I don't have the best ears. I can pick up things, by listening to it, but it could be way, way better. But I think that's probably the most important piece of advice that I would give.
Yeah, that's great. I try to learn songs by ear now. I never used to. I used to just rely on the tabs, but I found a lot of the tabs are wrong. And then even if, like, say I'd learned this song from a tab, I wouldn't commit it to memory in the same way as if I had sat down and learnt bar by bar, note by note myself.
Yeah.
So the other day I was learning, I found an isolated bass track for Something by the Beatles.
Yeah.
And it's just Paul McCartney's Hofner track, and just from listening to that and having the bass in my hands, I do put it into tablature, so I write it on Notepad, but it's kind of my own understanding of what each note means and how long to hold it. It's not proper music notation. But once I've been through that process, I find that when I follow the tab, then it only takes me 2 or 3 times, and I can follow it note for note, and then I can come away from that, and I'll probably commit a lot to memory because I sat there for an hour, 2 hours, breaking down every little bit. I'm not having to look at the page, or like it's kind of, I've learnt the song in less time, even though it might seem longer because I sat there for 2 hours initially. That song is kind of just there now.
Yeah.
Whereas if I just followed a tab and played for an hour or two, just going through it and going through it and going through it, I wouldn't have had that same experience, and I wouldn't have learned what I know about where he was playing things and how he played it. And it's just, you don't get that same level of detail, I think, when you just look at somebody else's interpretation than when you do your own.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and there are also, like you said, many tabs are wrong of how things are played. Not only like is the note right or wrong, but also they're played in positions that are really weird. But also, in many of these things, you kind of miss all the nuances of, is he or she like sliding down to that note? Is there a pull off? Like, it can be super subtle. Where in the neck are you playing that? Also, where's your hand position? So how are you getting that sound? All of these things you can only pick up if you really listen to it and start thinking, okay, I'm listening to this thing. How can I get it to sound closer to that? And then figure it out on your own. And the more you do it, like I said, the better you get at it. So the quicker things go.
Yeah, people hear things differently, don't they? I mean, sometimes I struggle with that kind of, is he playing it down here or is he playing it up there? Because the tone is different, isn't it, when you play it, higher up on one string as opposed to lower on another.
Yeah.
And those are like the nuances that you kind of get into. So like, in your first few weeks or months of transcribing, you're probably not going to pick up on stuff like that. But once you've done it for 6 months, you kind of start going, well, I know it's kind of there. And you kind of go, well, I know he played it on a P bass, and I know that sounds a bit like this when you play up there. You start to pick out that lower level detail. So it definitely helps. It can also be quite challenging as well, because you don't always hear the bass that clearly. So if you can't get like, some software to kind of isolate the bass and stuff like that, it's also a good challenge when you're just trying to pick it out of a mix.
Yeah.
And, if they've mixed the bass really low, or if that's typical of that style of music, you're already kind of having to push yourself to kind of go, is that the guitar I'm hearing or is that the bass line? But you're picking up so much, experience and developing yourself so much by having that experience. I think that's definitely great advice.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so just a little bit on content creation, and I'll let you go and eat. So, how's your approach to content creation sort of changed over time? So you've had the channel for quite a while now. Would you say what you do now is different, or have you got a better workflow? How does it kind of work now?
Yeah, I mean, it's different in the sense that my output is definitely a bit lower, just because of the fact that I've stopped doing mainly product reviews. Because that's something, and this is not to say it in a negative way, but anyone can do a product review of something. So you just grab a bass, play it, and here's how it sounds, which is good. It's a great piece of information for everyone if you want to hear how, let's say, a Fender P of 2009 sounds compared to this other bass. That's great. But I thought that it's interesting to share the things that only I can share. or that come from my personal experience, right? So I'm trying to share things from that point of view. So, okay, going out on tour, what have I learned doing that? How do I prepare for the tour? What I'm taking with me for the tour? Or if there are things, for example, the other day I recorded how I set up my basses video and showing the process so that people can see that. That kind of thing, that's what I want to focus more. Of course, if I get something like a pedal or whatever that I really like and I use, so I personally would buy it, I would use it, I want to share that for people. But I'm not doing companies at the moment, at least, not that they reach out to me and I do a product review to share with them. It gets a bit repetitive and there's a lot of the same, and I don't want to put it differently. I would rather have people playing their basses than watching me talk about stuff that they can buy, even though financially for the companies and for myself as well, it could be better. I would rather have them playing their gear than, craving and hey, what's the next thing that I can buy? Maybe the next thing you can buy, which would help, can be lessons, for example. That's also really useful.
Yeah, I think that authenticity is just a great thing, though, to kind of just share what you're doing from your point of view, your experience, because I find I gravitate more towards that type of content anyway, because you're getting an insight to somebody else's kind of, the way they do things and why they do it. And I just find that more interesting. I think one thing I was talking to Johnny about was that sometimes I'm not necessarily making content for content's sake. I'm just sharing what I'm doing. Yeah. So say I just happened to get a new pedal through the door and it's not sponsored or anything. I just bought it because I wanted to hear what it sounded like. I'll be messing about, just playing on it just to see what it does. And sometimes I'll just have my phone out, and start recording something, and I'll send it to my friend on WhatsApp or something. And then that sometimes just becomes the video I'll upload. I'm not so bothered about the quality in terms of the video. The audio is usually good. And, it's more true to what actually happened. I didn't kind of set all the lighting up and spend 2 hours writing a piece of music and then get the perfect take. It was just kind of like, I just got this pedal and this is what it sounds like. And so I've definitely started taking a more relaxed approach and trying to do the same thing, really. I'm kind of just sharing things from my point of view. Like, I started only recently talking on my videos because mine were just silent. They were like, it's a demo of this or comparing this against that. But now I kind of like, I'm just happy to just get on the camera and just tell people what I think about stuff. And I think people respond better to that as well. And I suppose following on from that question, would you have any sort of advice for fellow content creators? Because I suppose there's probably a lot of people who are playing the bass and they probably want to get into doing the YouTube thing. And would you have any advice given the experience you've had over the years?
Well, I think, like you said, probably the most important thing is to be authentic. Don't present yourself as something that you're not, because, shit hits the fan. So to be authentic, share things from a genuine place, why you want to do something, and try to give value to people. That's what I think. One reason that I've, let's say, also pulled back on the output, because if I put something out there, I want it to give value to people and not create content just for the sake of creating content. And also, with the limited time that I have, sometimes I just want to play to practice,
Yeah.
And if I get better, then I can make better content. So I would rather just do, like, say, one video a week where I feel comfortable. That's, hey, this is something that I think is interesting for people. Than stressing myself over, I need to put out 3 videos a week, for example, with Based on Tuesday. Sometimes I would, even though I really enjoy doing those videos and it's a lot of fun, but just keeping the schedule and the pacing of, okay, I need to release, I need to edit it, I need to film it, I need to mix it, and so on, to have another episode for next week. That definitely gets a bit stressful. So I would rather, work on something that I'm passionate about and I think that's going to help people, and put that out there, than just sheer volume of things because I want to release a lot of content and put myself out there. Of course, if you can manage that, go ahead, but I just like to practice for myself as well. I need to improve as well. I know by no means where I want to be playing wise. So just dedicating time to the instrument is also a good way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it takes so much time to put these videos together and to do all the editing and all the other stuff that goes with it. And I'm the same. Sometimes I just feel like I just want to play my bass. And it's weird because you get into this kind of, it's a bit of a trap, really, I suppose. Like, I sometimes feel guilty that I'm not creating content with the time I've got, the limited time I've got. But I kind of like think, well, I just want to play my bass. Like the other day, like I was saying, I was transcribing that Beatles song. I've been wanting to do that for ages, and I probably will share the tab when I've done it. So that, I suppose it will end up in some content, but I just like the time sat there transcribing on my own, no pressure. Because you do start to feel a bit of pressure with, like, especially the schedule, like trying to get one up every week or every 2 weeks or whatever. You can find yourself putting quite a bit of pressure on yourself, and I think it's probably good advice to kind of not worry about maybe be consistent in terms of quality, but not so much schedule, because things come up, and don't worry about it too much about getting it out, every week.
Yeah, I mean, I think also from, let's say, algorithm point of view, it's good if you, of course, post regularly so that YouTube senses, okay, it's coming, stuff is coming from this channel, because of course they make money from advertising, and that's what generates traffic. But like I said, I think if you can find a pacing that works for you and that you feel comfortable sharing the stuff, and it's genuine, I think, of course, it's easier said than done. I know it's like a hard balance to find, but I would rather put out, and speaking for myself only, something that I'm fully comfortable with sharing. And maybe it's like you said, the audio is good, but maybe it's a phone recording of me sharing something that's super important that I learned recently, but I don't have time to set up the cameras and the light. Like that setup video that I did, it was just filmed without any lighting. It was just me filming with the bass on my bed. And I think it's not a massive amount of views, but it definitely performed better than what I was expecting it to, due to the, setup circumstances. But it's something I thought, it's valuable for people to see. So why not put it out? The same process that you described now, like you transcribing, it can be, hey, look what I learned from transcribing something by the Beatles, and you share that, then you have your content already. That's
true. Yeah, that's a good idea. Absolutely. That's great. So have you got any sort of upcoming projects? What's next for you? So you're cracking on with the YouTube channel, and I know you're playing in bands over in Germany. So anything new on the horizon?
Well, I have a couple of video ideas that I want to do in the coming months. Can't say what they are, but of course the YouTube is going to keep going. But project-wise, I have this is going to be pretty interesting. I have an orchestral show with the band that I currently play for, Dr. Grapida. We're doing a charity event, and we're playing with the Philharmonic of the city where we're playing. So
it's going
to be interesting with a full orchestra.
Is that in Hamburg?
No, it's still like in the middle of Germany, like around Dortmund.
Okay.
More or less. So it's like us, the rock band, plus the Philharmonic Orchestra. So it's going to be really nice.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah, I'm pretty curious because we have backing tracks, that stuff that the Philharmonic Orchestra cannot play because it's Latin percussion and so on, stuff that they don't have. But of course, they are playing like the strings, the violins, then the orchestral percussion, and all the other instruments. So it's going to be an interesting mix. So I have that coming up. Then some festivals as well in the summer. And I just got confirmed today the possibility to open a few shows for an artist here in Germany in around July. So that's going to be also pretty fun with the band. We also have the album coming up soon for Dr. Crapida. So I think that's going to be around the mid of the year, more or less, to be confirmed still. But that was a really nice project to be a part of. So looking forward to that as well.
That sounds great. You'll have to send me some of the links to your bands and stuff, and we'll get that in the show notes for the podcast.
Sure.
But it's been absolutely great speaking to you today, and keep it up with the channel. I want to thank you for coming on. It's always great to speak to a fellow bass player and get sort of into the detail of all the signal chains and all that sort of stuff.
Thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, that's great. So to all you listening out there, so thank you. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Please remember to like and subscribe and rate the podcast. And we'll see you in the next one. Thank you very much.
Take care, guys.